Kathrine Switzer, thank you so much for joining us on the Sports Agents. I'm talking to you on the day of the Boston Marathon, a marathon that you know very well indeed and is steeped in Switzer history, which we'll get to. But we should just say as well, the great news from a British perspective is that Paula Radcliffe has now completed her 6 major marathons, her major city marathons, by running there today. But if it wasn't for you, she might not have been in that lineup today, and women's marathon running might not be what it is. Let's go right back to the start, to 1967, and you can pick up the story as to what happened.
Well, I just like to tag that, though, on Paula Radcliffe. Paula Radcliffe is a great heroine of mine. It's not often that we have heroines who are younger than us, but I watched her progress for a long time, for many years. And honestly, to hear that she's picked up her 6, that was absolutely fantastic. And she continues to inspire. And I think that she's feisty enough to have probably broken the gender barrier herself.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, actually. If there's anybody I know personally who would be that woman who did what you did, Paula would be right up there. But you must have, at the time, had so much bravery, so much determination to do what you did. You basically wanted to run the Boston Marathon, but women weren't included in the lineup. They weren't welcome.
But honestly, don't give me too much credit because I was a very, I wouldn't say naive, but I was maybe impetuous. I was only 20 years old. I was 19 when I made the decision that I really wanted to run the Boston Marathon. And it was really more of a bet to my coach. My old coach was 50 years old. I was 19. He seemed ancient, but he had run the Boston Marathon 15 times. He sort of adopted me when Syracuse University, having no sports whatsoever for women, he saw me out jogging and he sort of took me under his wing as an ex-marathon runner, old, thought he would never run again, and regaled me every night with stories of one of his 15 Boston marathons. This is a day that changed his life. He lived for this day. It was a day where he was somebody. He was just a postal carrier, right? And so when I told him one night in a blizzard that I wanted to also run the Boston Marathon, he said, well, it's too bad that women can't run the Boston Marathon. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, women are too weak and too fragile to run the marathon distance of 26.2 miles. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I'm out here, we're running 10 miles in a blizzard. And I started with 1 mile. And he said, yes, my dear, but 10 miles is not 26.2. And I said, I know that, but I know I can climb up. Well, we argued, and finally he said, okay, tell you what, if any woman could do it, I believe you could do it, but you'd have to show me in practice. So in practice, the day came finally when we were going to run our 26 miles. And when we finished, we're coming into the finish, I said, I don't think we did the distance long enough. I think this was a short course. And he said, well, no, it's not. It's long if it's anything. I said, no. Let's run another 5 miles. And he said, can you run another 5 miles? I said, well, sure. I feel great, don't you? Well, anyway, we went on. And as we are now finishing 31 miles, he is losing it all over the road, and when we finished, he fainted. And when he came to, he said, women have hidden potential in endurance and stamina. So we had learned at that moment that indeed, women were very special. He then insisted I sign up for the race. And I said, why can't we just go and jump in? And he said, no, you're a card carrying member of the Athletic Federation. You cannot do that. You've got to pay your $2 entry fee and you've got to sign up. Else it doesn't count, he said. I said, okay. So I signed up and then went to Boston with these numbers. I signed my name KV Switzer with my initials. I've been doing that since I was about 13 because I was, writing sports for my local school newspaper. And my dad had misspelled my name on my birth certificate. So it was always changed by the typesetter. And so I got annoyed with that. And I went with KV Switzer. And when I signed the entry form, it was KV Switzer. And that's what they assumed was that I was a guy at Boston. And that's how I got my number. But I mean, the story
that's not
is
the full story, obviously.
No, the story is, of course, when I pinned the bib number on, started down the road, the press were all over me, noticing that there was a girl in the race. The race officials followed in another vehicle. and one of the race co-directors, a guy by the name of Jacques Semple, a very feisty Scotsman, by the way, jumped off of that bus and went down the street and grabbed me and screamed at me, "Get the
And
hell
that's, if
out of my
anybody's seen it,
race."
this is the iconic image actually of
Yeah.
you being grabbed. And anybody who sees that picture will notice what you're wearing as well, because you're in sweats. You know, you're not in what we now see elite athletes running in. And so everything about this is pioneering. You know,
It
the
is.
image is so iconic, because I think this, you know, the late 60s, as we know, was an era of great civil rights uprising and women's rights uprising, and this fitted into all of that.
Yes. Well, yeah, see, but under that sweats, I had a very cute shorts and top because I was very proud of being a woman. Unfortunately, it was freezing headwind with sleet and snow. And every runner in the race wore everything they had. So there I was in a baggy sweat suit. Very happy to be keeping warm. Unfortunately, it got quite sodden as the race went on.
Well,
But
it's not the kind of
yes,
technical
it
material that we'd
is
see now, is it? On a
absolutely, absolutely. We couldn't even imagine that people would have tights and gloves and magic, things that repel the rain and the sleet. Anyway, but indeed, yeah. But he attacked me at this point, and those pictures were taken. Series of iconic pictures were taken of the moment, and my boyfriend then coming into for the save and hitting the official and throwing him out of the race. But it's a funny story in the retelling, but it was a very awful moment. It
I
really was an
imagine
awful
quite
moment. Yeah.
frightening. And
Yes.
I think the photograph has been voted as one of the 100 photographs of an image that changed the world.
Yeah.
And I know you want to deflect that at the very beginning of our chat, and not take that kind of responsibility on. But as you've already proved to your coach and people who ran with you, you were more than capable of running the marathon. But it's incredible to think the marathon didn't even become an Olympic event for women until 1984. So
Well,
we still
yeah,
had a way to go, right?
yeah, absolutely. Well, indeed. I mean, that moment was a changing moment in my life. I decided to finish the race no matter what. I was going to finish on my hands and my knees if I had to, because I really wanted to prove that women deserved to be there and could do these capable things. Other women didn't believe that, of course. They were afraid to take action on something. But at that moment, it was no longer just a matter of running a marathon. That was a matter of really proving that a woman could do it. And I was determined, really determined, because it was an era when women couldn't get into the Ivy League universities. We were denied job opportunities. There was not equal pay for equal work. I mean, all of these things did not exist. And I suddenly began to realize that women would take part if they had only had an opportunity. I had my coach Arnie, who believed in me, and there we were, and my life was changing before my eyes, and it was at a very young age. When I finished the race, I came to two conclusions. One, I was going to become a better athlete because I couldn't prove to this guy Jacques Semple and his team at Boston that I was serious until I became a good athlete. When I finished in 4 hours and 20 minutes, he laughed and he said I could have walked it that fast. How about that? And when I ran a 2:51, he finally admitted I was an athlete. but anyway, and then the other thing is I wanted to create opportunities for women. And I didn't know what that looked like. I knew it was going to take a lot of work. And eventually I came up with an idea of creating a series of women's only races, events that were non-intimidating and welcomed women, and to create those events around the world. I went and found major sponsorship in Avon Cosmetics, and we eventually had races in 27 countries, over 1 million women, and 400 events. I could present that data to the International Olympic Committee, which I did in 1981, showing that we had 27 countries in 5 continents, and their requirement was 23 countries and 24 countries, sorry, and 3 continents. 24 countries and 3 continents. And they voted the women's marathon into the Olympic Games then in 1981 for 1984, which was utterly fantastic. One of this is a wonderful UK moment, actually, in that the final marathon to prove to the International Olympic Committee and the IAAF was held in London in 1980. And that race actually was a design model for what became the London Marathon in 1981. And Sir Horace Cutler said at the time, he said, "Ladies, I salute you. We've only closed these streets for the Queen."
And here we are 44
Here we
years
are.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Paula Radcliffe and Sharon Lokedi.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
Obviously Paula running one of her world records on the streets of London, one of the great marathon moments and a record that stood for such a long time. But
Yes.
when you see the times that women are running now, and obviously there's a lot of reasons, the times come down through the sophistication in their training and the sports science, but also the equipment. And there's actually been a bit of controversy, hasn't there, in the last kind of decade or so about shoes, for example, and how much they're helping. But actually, you know, when you think about all the other things that we do with more science behind it, the wearable tech, I mean, it's an obvious development, isn't it? And I'm sure you would have loved to have had all of that equipment.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had to cut holes in my shoes so that my toenails wouldn't rub, and I was bleeding out of my shoes most of the time. That's how difficult it was. It was very, very tough. But let's not forget the huge psychological impact of a barrier breaker. So when Paula Radcliffe ran her 2:15, it was off the charts. It was absolutely off the charts. But what she did is she showed us that we can do that we have the capability, and that my old coach saying women have hidden endurance and stamina, what we're showing now is that those women can run for a very long period of time with the endurance, but hold the stamina part of it, their speed over the course. When the 209 was run in Chicago, many people erupted and said, "Oh no, that can't be true. It can't be true," which is what they said about Paula when she ran the 2:15. But don't forget the shoe technology is phenomenal now. That we have not only cushioning and protective shoes, but shoes that help propel us with energy return.
Yeah.
And I just was at an Adidas shoe launch here in Boston for their Adi Zero, next version of the Adi Zero. And it was phenomenal to hear the scientists and the technicians talking about how those shoes are made and how the carbon fiber is making the spring. Where it's going to go, I don't know. But I mean, when you see the performances, it's really very, very, very
because I think those when these shoes and all the the brands that make a variation of the kinds of technology we're talking about started coming out, people were talking about park runners and people who run 10Ks taking off minutes from their PBs, and a friend of mine took 50 seconds off wearing a shoe with new technology. Explain a little bit about how that works, because I think anybody who hasn't worn one of these shoes will not kind of fully be able to kind of compute how it can make you run so much quicker.
I'm glad you brought up the fact that ordinary park runners are finding this an amazing experience as well. Even I, at age 78, ran a 10K about 6 weeks ago and knocked off a minute and a half on my 10K time, and it had to be the Supernova shoes I was wearing.
So, do you mind embarrassing me by telling me what your 10K time is, Kathrine?
That was actually very good for me. I mean, it was a 58:39 at 78. It was pretty good. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah. That is amazing.
I hope those days aren't behind me.
And so if anybody's tried these shoes on, that you kind of almost, it feels like you're falling forwards in them, doesn't it? It has the angle of the shoe can kind of make you feel like you're kind of does it help your cadence, or how is the energy working?
Look, first of all, I think you don't feel tired, which is phenomenal. And I feel propelled forward. I don't feel like I'm falling forward.
But you know what I mean? You get that feeling.
I'm a very upright runner. But basically, I just feel that that I'm not pounding. I'm going.
Right.
I'm coming off the pavement rather than going into
it. Yeah.
Yes,
so the energy that you would have wasted going into the pavement is coming out effectively.
Yes. And I never understood this whole energy return thing until I wore them, and I really, really do feel that way.
So what's your training like, Kathrine, now?
Okay, at the very moment right now, I'm having some problems with vertigo, which is another issue. But in general, my training is a somewhat hard, easy program of running. I probably run 6 days a week, and up to an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Then I try to do a long run once a week, meaning an hour, hour and a half at the most now, unless I'm getting ready for a bigger, longer race. But I also, with my husband's inspiration, really try to do more speed work.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I spend a lot of time on paths, mountain track kind of paths that are smooth, and I can do what I would call repeat 800s, 800 meters. But instead of doing the exact 800 meters, unless it's marked off, do about 4 minutes, 4 minutes 15, 4 minutes 30,
Wow.
and then slow down and then do it again. And and don't kid yourself. It's really hard because you really have to keep pushing.
How many marathons did you run after that initial Boston?
That was the first, so 41 after that.
Wow.
But I want to tell you an interesting story again. One of the happiest days in my life was Boston Marathon 2017. I decided I would go back and run it on my 50th anniversary. I was in good shape, and I took a year to really train up for it. And I really, really ran well. I mean, I didn't run a good time because I stopped 13 times, but it was a dream race, no problems whatsoever, and it was
Amazing.
really only 24 minutes slower anyway than my
Initially
first race.
did.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah.
incredible. Do you ever think, gosh, if I'd had the kind of training, the technology that the women are able to get their hands on now, and it's so accessible for people, isn't it? How much quicker you could have gone in your prime, in your 20s and 30s?
No, I never think of that. That's interesting. I always, because of my preoccupation from age 20 to almost age, I would say 35, was getting the women's marathon into the Olympic Games. It was
Mm,
more about activism than about my own training.
mm.
I would say maybe in 1975, when I ran a 251, and I thought I was going to win the Boston Marathon, and I got absolutely hosed by a world record. um, I could I have run better if I'd had the equipment and shoes and stuff. Yes, of course, but we didn't. So I never think about what couldn't have happened. I think about
The
what
amazing
needs
things
to
that
be
you
done.
did. And
Yeah.
it took to 2018 for you to run London for the first time. Is that right?
Yes, 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 because I really had always wanted to go back. Here I was race directing for that women's Avon race in a marathon in 1980, and I was in the press bus right alongside of the women, and we were going across, the Westminster Bridge and up the embankment and into, the Docklands, and then, right there finishing at the. Oh my gosh, it was just wonderful. And I said, I really want to do this myself.
Mm.
In fact, that very night, we were partying like crazy because we had such a success. So at 2 a.m, I went out alone and ran across Westminster Bridge.
Your idea of
It was
partying
like this.
is
It was
very
like this.
interesting. So what was it like when you finally did run London? We're obviously in the week of the London
Oh.
Marathon now. How special is it compared
Oh, it
to?
is. It is amazing. The entire city is part of this, and embracing it. The crowd is like 6 to 8, 10 people deep all the way around,
Mm.
and I've come back to spectate several times. And you can't even get up to the roadway to cheer for your friends because the crowd is so thick, but the spirit is wonderful. Oh, and in fact, after 2018, I was so proud. I was given the Spirit of London Award, and
Oh,
so yeah,
long overdue, I think.
yeah, it was, but it was wonderful to have that. It was really very nice. But
Yeah.
honestly, London is a favorite city. After
Because I
living
think
there for that
Boston,
summer.
you still have to have certain of the big city marathons have a time, don't they, that you have to have run to be able to run it. And obviously London is pretty much, open to, you get people taking 6 hours, 8 hours, and obviously the elites breaking records at the front. And Boston you've got to be quite quick to run Boston. Is
Well,
that
they
right?
have qualification time. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a different city.
So it's a
You
different
know,
kind of it's a different kind of environment, that
Yes,
marathon.
well, the race starts in Hopkinton. It's just a sleepy little New England village, and the roads out of Hopkinton and through some of the villages is quite narrow, and over time those roads have expanded, etc. So it is complicated in terms of traffic control, and having to completely close down those streets. So
Mm.
it is a different situation. They can't accommodate a lot of people. Having said that, they did accommodate about 30,000 this year. They're out there finishing right outside my hotel window.
Right now.
Yes.
They're still finishing.
Oh, well, no, it's the midpoint in the race for most people. The elites
Right,
finished
right.
about an hour ago.
Right, right. So we're literally speaking to you in the thick of the Boston Marathon right now. Are you making a
Absolutely.
trip to London this year, Kathrine?
I am actually. I'm going to be there next week after the marathon. Not for the marathon itself, but I never say never to London. That's for sure. You might see me there next time.
Somebody had to be the first. Somebody had to be that person that pushed the boundaries and created what is just phenomenal now how women are running the marathon. As you pointed out, two big barriers, two big landmarks that have been broken in terms of time.
Can I tell you something else though? Okay, about this. It's not just the time and breaking the barriers athletically, okay? Because women's running has become not only an athletic revolution, it's become a social revolution and even a financial revolution. This year in the New York City Marathon, 55,000 people, the biggest marathon in the world in November 2024, there were actually 5,000 more women in the race than men. And when I won that race 50 years before, 1974, women, that was the year women were first allowed to have a credit card. Okay. Up to then, daddy had to sign for you or your husband had to sign for you. So in 1974, we were allowed our first credit card. And I said, you can bet that those 27,000 women have their own credit card and they're spending millions. And in fact, in the USA, and I believe now in Mexico and in Canada, and I heard from Brazil also, that there are more women runners than men. In the USA, 58% of all participating runners are women. So that is a social and financial revolution.
And you know what else is happening, Kathrine? I'm seeing it with younger people. I was speaking to Brendan Foster. You must have met Sir Brendan Foster.
Oh my gosh, he's wonderful.
And he was talking about the many races that his company puts on. They are getting more and more entries in that 18 to 24 range. It used to be something that was seen as women when they were a bit older, and they were kind of more doing the longer distance running. And young women are really getting engaged and running half marathons and 10Ks. And, they're not waiting until they've had a family and getting into running. It's something that they're seeing as part of their life, which is such a brilliant ethos, isn't it? That it is something to take through your life.
Well, here's the other thing. First of all, those younger women are women who have also had the opportunity at school to play sports. We didn't. There were no sports for girls. Yeah. But now they've grown up with sports and they want to stay fit. They love being fit. And running is easy, convenient, and totally accessible. So when a person has a busy life and they've got it, especially for women who have young children and stuff, running is something that they can fit into their lifestyle very, very easily. So that's really powerful. And it also keeps them in shape for other sports, just really important. Yeah.
Well, Kathrine, I've had the pleasure of interviewing you before at London, and I found you to be just such an inspirational woman. And to see you today and hear your enthusiasm and passion and hear you still running those incredible times, again, I feel incredible. My cup is full of inspiration talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you've done.
Stay fearless.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.